I'm Allie with Potomac Beads. In this Better Beader episode, we're going to talk about what needles are appropriate to work with bead embroidery. A little bit ago, Anna and I sat down, we did a YouTube live video where we showed how to do the basics of bead embroidery. During that, I realized that many of you had questions when it comes to needles and what's appropriate and why you don't want to use some versus others for bead embroidery. We're going to tackle some of those issues in this Better Beader episode. Remember, if you haven't yet, make sure you click in that corner the subscribe button so you get regular updates from us here at Potomac Beads and you don't miss out on anything. Also, if you want to check out any of these needles, remember there's links below me in the video. Also, please, please, please comment with your favorites, your suggestions, and really help grow the beading community and let them know what you love for bead embroidery and needles. So if you've been beading for a long time, you'll recognize some of these different brands of needles that are sitting around here. And the differences of people are kind of hysterical. You're either in or you're against certain needles. People are very adamant about their needles. When it comes to bead embroidery, which is again is going to be sewing beads onto a surface rather than just something where, say, I'm stitching without doing anything else and I'm just using the thread and needle. Bead embroidery, you're going to be stitching and applying or appliquing to a surface. This is stiff stuff. It's a starched cotton, starch poly, and what it's going to be is it's used as your surface for a lot of different bead embroidery. A lot of times with the different needles that you're working with, you want to start with a stiffer needle. I can get through this bead embroidery piece with a size 12 regular pony brand needle. However, it is flimsy. It's going to be easier to start out with a thicker or a stiffer needle. This is a size 12 pony needle. The reason that it's easier to start out with one that's stiffer is because the backing is going to be a little bit hard to go through that beading foundation with just a size 12 or a size 13 needle. So the 13's kind of out of the case. Now you can always go on top of the bead embroidery and use a smaller needle if you want to do a little bit more intricate pattern. However, to actually go through the surface of both the stiff stuff as well as that nice backing material. So if you want to go through some of the ultra suede and you want to finish up your bead embroidery piece, even something simple like this, now you're adding in 2 layers. So I need my needle to be able to get through 2 layers of cord. Now you can see here, I can go through with my 12 and I still have to wiggle a little bit because this regular size 12 pony needle is going to be designed to go through and work with beading rather than bead embroidery. Now I can take this through and it'll go through the edge and be fine. However, when I try to take a size 12 through, both of these, I'm not going to use this small hole there, you can see it can get a little bit difficult to go through those surfaces. Now obviously I don't have a needle attached, but when you go through, you kind of have to wiggle it through because sometimes you're not going to be able to pierce through there. Instead, what I would recommend for working with bead embroidery is working with a short, sharp needle. So as you see here, John James is going to call them sharps. Tulip got smart and they actually started doing and saying bead embroidery or beading needle. So if you notice on these Tulip brand needles, these say sharp, short. Sharp, short. That means it's still a sharp needle, obviously, it still has its point, but it is short, which is going to make it a little bit more stiffer and easier for, hence, that bead embroidery, versus a long needle, which you're generally going to do when you're doing bead weaving, not doing the applique onto an actual surface. So when in doubt, search for that sharp, short, or the short needle. That's going to be a little bit stiffer. When it comes to bead embroidery, I know these, as far as the bead embroiderers in our warehouse, are their preferred, are going to be those Tulip short, sharp needles. Many people also like those John James needles, also those short or the sharps one. These are size 12 here, so they're going to be a little bit thinner when it comes to it. And some people do prefer that for bead embroidery as well too. But I like and I would recommend using those short sharps. That is because they're going to be a little bit stiffer in order to go through your bead embroidery versus a long needle. So Miyuki has both 10s and 11s in shorts and longs, and then the 13 is just going to be its standard size needle. The same when it comes to the John James needles. They are going to have the sharps and the short versus the long. The pony needles are all going to be the same. So if you do have pony needles and you do want to start embroidering, I would recommend starting with a size 10 needle. The 12s, again, they're going to get bendy and they're going to have a hard time going through just the stiff stuff, let alone the stiff stuff, and by the time you add the backing. Because when you're sewing through, and if you haven't checked out Anna and my live video from the Friday with the bead embroidery, or Tuesday, I'm sorry, check that out as well. Because you are going through both surfaces as you're using that bead embroidery needle. Like I said, if you do get to the point that you want to add another layer onto it, many layers for the bead embroidery get added on top of the surface. So here we started adding the delicate beads on top, and we're not sewing through the surface at all. So if I have a smaller 15 OC bead that I need to do on the interior, keep in mind you can always switch out your needle from decorating on top of the surface versus what you actually use to pierce through the surface on the bead embroidery. Hopefully this answered some questions for people. A size 10 needle is going to be thicker and usually stiffer than, say, a size 11, that's the next one down. Thinner yet is a 12, thinner yet is a 13. So keep in mind those 10s and 11s and those short 12s, that's what you're gonna want for that bead embroidery rather than going into like something like a 13. Again, as the number gets bigger, the needle gets smaller. Additionally, as the needle gets smaller, the eye of the needle also gets smaller, so keep that in mind. The tulips are great because they have a nice big eye, no wider than the piece of needle itself, and also they have a little bit of coloring to them that you can see in there. Keep in mind, I like to separate my needles, so I have my bead embroidery needles that I'll keep in the actual case, and then I have my other needles that I keep in my needle case as well too. So that way I can actually keep separate my bead embroidery versus my beading needles. That way I'm not mixing up and losing some bead embroidery needles, which tend to be a little bit more pricey. Again, if you want to check out more bead embroidery, we have a couple of YouTube videos for you, as well as that YouTube live that Anna and I did a week and a half ago. Check that out. It was great fun, and now I'm getting ready to resupply my needles in my bead embroidery kit so that way I can get ready and do more kits. As we get to go outside, hopefully get to travel, it's a great time for bead embroidery as well because you don't use that many beads and you can stitch and have fun carrying together a lot of lightweight projects. Remember, again, if you do need any supplies, check out the links below. Many of you are going to be way better at bead embroidery and way more knowledgeable. Make sure to comment below in the video as well to add all of your useful tips and hints too for your fellow beaders out there. As always, thank you so much for watching and have fun doing bead embroidery and using the right needle so that way you're not frustrated in the mix as you're starting to design.